We're back.
Hi, Alexis.
Hey, Sav.
We are here with the fourth episode of Chrysalis Collective, the podcast.
We're going to be diving into all things pleasure and the spectrum that it exists on today.
Absolutely, yes. We're going to go deep into our own personal experiences and how our experiences have illuminated this work to us and what this means. So let's dive in. Tell me, Alexis.
I'm just thinking about how even right now, I was on the phone with my mom telling her how this is the topic that we were going to be talking on or talking about on this episode. And her immediate reaction was cochina. And I told her I was going to put her on blast about saying that because it's like so reactionary, right? Like
Yeah,
pleasure is associated with like, ooh, nasty, you shouldn't be doing that. Like
dirty.
that exactly, dirty, shameful, what like to even say the word, right, is like elicits some kind of reaction or response. And like it's so heavily ingrained into our conditioning and the messaging that we get consistently throughout our upbringing, so that yeah, when you hear pleasure you automatically, you can't help but to have a reaction or response. And what is that though? Like what is your individual reaction or response? And I feel like at this point in my life, my reaction is just like, yeah, like very much just like a deep satisfaction, like just yes, like all the way,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I'm here for it because I
You're
deserve
a
it.
Yeah, you're a pleasure
Yeah,
maximalist. The
very much so.
more is better. Absolutely. I mean, if you think about the generations of women that we come from, pleasure has been very much kept from them, and that's not
Hmm.
something that our lineages like have had really the opportunity in their young lives at least to embrace to the same degree. Like this is very much something that we have fought to gain the opportunity to have, is to be able to say like, yeah, we have experienced pleasure and we deserve pleasure, we want pleasure, but even still there's a lot of social shame and stigma
Hmm.
associated with it. Like I got my account with Stripe, my payment server that like I sell my womb wellness workbooks, and I do have like a sexuality embodiment journey workbook that I sell. Like it was like, oh, this is adult content. We can't sell this anymore. We're banning your account. And I'm like, oh, okay. Just because we're talking about these things doesn't mean that it is dirty or wrong in any way. There's nothing dirty about pleasure here.
Exactly. It's a part of life that we get to embrace and experience and come into. Pleasure isn't something that is just given to us. We have to
Sure.
like just embrace it and take it. And I think that that comes in so many forms, whether it's, in your morning coffee or in a nice good stretch or in like just the little moments that you feel exactly that pleasure in, exist on that spectrum from, the little daily things, like I said, all the way to sex and all the way into whatever feels good for you and brings you to that feeling of fully being in your body and connecting to just the energy around you. I feel like that is what I think of when I think of, higher forms of pleasure, of just like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, like I feel my energy in its totality. And oh, like that, being that present and that in yourself and stepping into your power in that way is extremely powerful. And yeah, exactly that, pleasurable. How do you feel
Yeah.
like you think of the spectrum?
I think that it has been a journey for me to embrace pleasure in all aspects of my life, because when you grow up in a very highly controlled religious environment, you are, for some reason, like, you're not really supposed to be happy. Like, happiness isn't the goal of life. Pleasure isn't something
Mm.
that you're really, like, that is sinful. To be experiencing pleasure outside of God, really. Which, like, now I'm like, what is
Mm-hmm.
different than, aren't we all just part of the same energy? But anyway, it's taken a long time for me to let myself be happy, and to let myself experience pleasure outside of sex, letting myself experience pleasure in my life, to like romanticize my life, that TikTok trend to term.
Yeah.
I love it though, like finding ceremony in the things that I do, but really slowing down and taking time to be intentional with the things that are in front of me. Like you said, like waking up in the morning and drinking matcha, like that. There's pleasure in that, taking a warm bath, that is pleasurable. Moving
Mm-hmm.
my body is pleasurable. Feeling the sun on my face, all of that is pleasure. And it exists in tandem with sexuality. Like, I don't think that you can deconstruct um, our self pleasure and our sexual pleasure from the pleasure of life, because we are sexual beings. We move we move with this energy and this fluidity with the environment, with the earth, and like all of that energy is the same energy that leads me through, my meditations and my work, is the same energy that flows through an orgasm. Like, those two things for me are like very, very connected, and they're not separate. So I'm actively like try to use pleasure, like sexual pleasure, I try to use it as a tool in my daily life, and like let it connect me deeper to these other things around me. But
It's
tell.
really, yeah, I'm just thinking about like how liberating it is to hear you talk about using pleasure as a tool, because for me, so much of pleasure has been kind of performative, at least when it
Mm,
comes to like, my sexuality and embodying that in a more full way. And like now being in a space where my pleasure doesn't feel performative. It's just like you're, hitting the nail right on the head for me and being like, okay, yeah, that's exactly like I totally understand that, because it hasn't always felt that way. It doesn't hasn't always felt like something I get to use and I
sure.
get to harness and move with. It's like I'm moving in spite of it. And
Mm.
that's such a different energy to be in.
I mean, I think because we are sold these narratives as like young girls specifically, like that are anything that we experience is only for the benefit of other people. Like, we're taught to be people pleasers. And so like
Hmm.
in heteronormative, society, like especially in patriarchal society too, like it is female pleasure is secondary to male pleasure. And so like, growing up being told that, like, told and shown how to behave for the comfort and for the pleasure of men was a big thing. And then just to have your experiences and your pleasure minimized, even through all of these
Hmm.
things about like, oh, it's more difficult for women to have orgasms, like all of that, you know, I don't think I experienced an orgasm during sex until I was with my current partner, So, like, I didn't think
Hmm.
that that was something that was really I was entitled to, that I got to
Mm.
that maybe like I could figure that out by myself, but I certainly like when I'm having sex with a guy, I can't ask for that, and like was embarrassed to even feel pleasure. All of it was very performative, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
making a show of it because this is what I think I should look like, or I think I should sound like, you know, or think I should do. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, you know, there's a lot of social things that we are that are pushed upon us from,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
I
So
think I could definitely relate with, the pleasure being performative, but it's interesting how, in my experience, when I did have my first orgasm, it wasn't on my terms. Like, it was my
mm,
first partner I ever
mm,
had. They were the ones that made it a point for that to be an experience that I had. And there was still
mm,
very much a performative aspect to it, but it was like I was so ashamed to even experience pleasure on my own that the
mm,
first time I ever did experience that was with a partner. And
mm,
that was like, I then gave so much more of my power away to them because it
oh
was
yeah,
like, you are the the way that I get to reach this level of pleasure.
mm,
And
mm,
it very much influenced my, yeah, ability to really take ownership of my pleasure on my own terms. Like, I didn't allow myself to feel that on my own until I did get out of the relationship with them. And it was very much like a on and off again high school kind of relationship,
yeah,
but it was just like so empowering once I did reach the place of like, oh, I don't need them for this. Like, I can do this and connect with myself in this way. And like, wow, like, I also didn't even know that, I, like you said, I totally only thought about male pleasure and like what was going to feel good for them, and like, there, I didn't even know that women could orgasm. I
right,
I did not know that at all. So whenever it happened, I was like, wait, what is, like, is that what that was? Like, there was just a lot of confusion, and it's just crazy to like look back at teenage Alexis and be like, oh, there was so much that I didn't know. There was so much
mm,
about my own body that I left up to other people to teach me about
mm,
in settings that weren't the safest for me
yeah,
emotionally, physically, and I'm just glad that we're creating spaces for other people to even start to, just contemplate, think about what is
yeah,
pleasure? How,
right.
yeah, how does that show up in your life?
Because masturbation, like self pleasure, that's a form of self care. That's a form of self
Mm-hmm.
love. And, you know, that is something that is, I think it's really, really important that everybody does that regularly, you know, that you have an intimate knowledge, an intimate understanding of your body and what brings you pleasure. I remember, I think I've talked about it on the podcast, but like growing up being told that masturbation is so shameful and sinful, dirty and wrong, but doing it anyways, and then like feeling guilty about it, but that didn't really last very long because I was a teenager. But from a really early age, like that was an outlet for me to relieve a lot of stress and tension, you know, like when you touch your body, when you touch yourself, and if you are able to, you know, climax and like help yourself do that, it is a whole body experience and an emotional experience and a spiritual experience to be able to do that and to go through that and to experience it as a form of release, because that's what it
Mm-hmm.
really means for me, you know, like that when you achieve orgasm, get to that climactic like sense, now like you have the opportunity to take whatever is inside of you, like whatever you're holding on to, stress, fear,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, and release it. Let it be as big as it needs to be and move through your fingers, move through your toes, move through your head and through your throat, like completely open up. And so I feel very passionately like about teaching people how to touch themselves, how to masturbate, how to create self pleasure, because it is a vital part of being alive. Even if you don't orgasm, you still get so much from just having those really tender, really gentle, really intimate conversations with yourself. I think it is so valuable for everyone, but especially, people with vaginas, people with vulvas, and, wombs, to have that connection, because generationally we have been stripped from that and removed from being able to experience that level of self-awareness and self-pleasure, and it's really important to take it back.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the tension that we hold in our bodies and how going and working up to a climax, that's we feel that tension we hold in certain parts of our bodies, and then once you do reach orgasm, it's like, ooh, yes, an
Yeah,
entire release, like, and feeling pleasure in that way is, it's power. Like, it is
absolutely.
pure power in its essence, and it's like, to co-create that with somebody is one thing, but to have that purely coming from you is, it's intimacy that needs to constantly be checked into. You're right. Masturbation is definitely self-love and self-care, because I walk around in this body all day, so why not? Just like I would give myself a nice hot bath and
Hmm.
put lotion on myself, like, if we're gonna make a checklist, like, put masturbation on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's vital, because especially if you are in, if you're with another person, if you have a partner and you're having sex with a partner, how can you expect them, or how can you teach them what gives you pleasure if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have that awareness of your own pleasure? And so take the time before, and during, sexual experiences with other people, to find out what feels good. Does it feel good to touch my clitoris in this way, or do I like it better if I have, if I'm penetrating myself with something, or, if you have a penis, like what feels good? Do you like to be touched
Yeah.
this way? Do you like to be held this way? Like, there's so many things that if you don't slow down and really take the time, like, start with your head. If it's hard to just go ahead and start with your genitals, like, rub your head, scratch your hair. Oh, how
Mm-hmm.
does it feel to touch my hair in this way? Okay, move down to your neck. Do I like firm pressure? Do I like to be stroked soft? Touch your nipples, touch your breasts, touch your stomach and your womb. Work your way down your body, and then, like, just place your hand, on yourself. Place your hand and feel like, okay, what happens if I increase the pressure in this way? Like, take it very slowly with no expectations of yourself, and then just see where it goes, because it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be gentle, and it's supposed to be empowering. It's not supposed to be scary, but it can be, because we hold trauma and fear, like, it's a lot. It's really hard, but your body is there for you, and it is a gift,
Exactly.
to be able to enjoy this with your body.
And self-exploration and curiosity is supposed to be free of judgment. So even down to how your body looks when you may be doing
Mm.
these things, to look at yourself naked in a mirror, that is also where you need to start. That's a beautiful place to start,
Hmm.
to see yourself fully, to really appreciate and affirm yourself your in how pleasurable it is to just look at yourself even.
Hmm.
That's also, I feel like, a wonderful place to get to really love on yourself and feel that you are safe in the body that you're in because it's yours. And
Oh yeah.
you choose how you speak to it, how you speak about it, and how you interact with it. So I think that that's another, I feel like, useful tool. Um,
For
yeah.
sure. Yeah, it takes a long time. It's a journey. Like for me, I'll say like it's taken 10 plus years of me even being like 13 years of me being or of me exploring my sexuality. I'll say like if I started exploring this with myself around age 14 and now here I am. Like it's taken all that time to get to a point where I feel secure in my pleasure. I know what makes me feel good. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. And I can use that and transfer it into my life because sexual pleasure is a vital part of who I am, but it continues into everything that I do. And so when I feel secure in my pleasure, and my sense of self and sexuality, then I feel more pleasure in my day-to-day life, and I feel like I have a tool and an outlet to work through a lot of things. Like sometimes when I'm having sex, like my mind will wander,
Hmm.
and I used to tell myself like stay focused, like what are you doing, like be in the moment, right? But now I've realized, like, okay, this is actually like a form of meditation and allowing the mind to wander and to be imaginative and creative and to flow to find the thoughts that it needs to find by using my energy and using my partner's energy. I can achieve a different type of awareness of my problems, of my fears, of the things that are causing me stress, and I can unpack them with my physical body. It's somatic, right? It's allowing
Hmm.
energy to flow through our bodies, um, and doing it through sex and through orgasm is really, really effective. There are times now where, like, my partner is a cisgendered male, so he has a penis, and I don't think he listens to this podcast, so I can talk about his penis on our podcast, right? I don't know if his mom listens to this. We'll have to. She might want to skip this part, but
He doesn't have to
anyway.
listen to this part, yeah.
Anyway, like I have come to a spiritual relationship with um, his penis as a tool to, it gives me energy. It has lessons for me. It has special energy within it that helps break up what I have going on. It helps create an opening for me to let all that shit flow out and to do it through achieving pleasure and they're experiencing pleasure. And so I have gotten to that point very, very gradually over the years. Like that didn't just happen overnight where I'm like, oh, now sex is this sort of like spiritual lesson learning experience for me, but it is now. And it's also very physically pleasurable. And so those two things together help, like they affect the way I show up in my life.
That's so interesting of thinking of your partner's sexual energy as a tool also because it's their own tool, right? So, of course, how that interacts with yours is very yeah, it's spiritual and it comes with its own guidance as well. And I feel like in listening to you, I'm just thinking about the fact that I'm in a queer relationship, so being in a relationship with another woman, I just see the creativity that
Mm-hmm.
exists in the space that we have, because that's the thing that I really appreciate and enjoy about being in a queer relationship, is that
For sure.
it's it's such a creative space to come together with another person and really allow a softness and
Mm-hmm.
just an experience that is tailored to each one of our needs in the moment. And yeah, like processing through things, like when my mind does wander, I appreciate you giving that insight of like, no, that's something that like gives you, it's a form of meditation. Like it's something that, like, where is the mind going, and like what kind of information do you get from that? I think that sometimes it is easy, yeah, like you said, to judge and to kind of be like, no, you're supposed to be, this is the expectation, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's the point of pleasure. There isn't supposed to be expectations, there isn't supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
judgment. So to really free up that space and like only open more of a pocket for more creativity is really, really beautiful to think about it in that way.
Yeah, I love what you said about the queer space too, because like there's really nothing like to women in a sexual experience, like to have that feminine energy amplified and doubled, like the connection of the womb to the womb, yoni to yoni, like all of that is like it's embodied in a very unique way, and that's
Hmm.
very sacred space. So I love what you shared with that. So let's see. What what do you think is the biggest hurdle in achieving pleasure in your daily life? Like what keeps you from feeling pleasure?
I think I notice the access to pleasure feels a lot more constricted when I feel the subconscious belief arise of, this is the way things should be, or this
Mm-hmm.
is what I should be doing. Like going back to that energy of expectation is definitely what I notice impedes the most. Like that's definitely the biggest hurdle, because I am now placing that judgment on myself. I'm looking at myself without grace and just being very harsh. I think that's something that I've, and especially in my most recent cycle, have noticed like, wow, when things get hard, for some reason, you double down on that and like decide to
Mm-hmm.
also be hard on yourself.
Mm.
And why is that the route we're choosing? Like
Mm.
to move through things and do that in a energy of grace and of love and of compassion towards self, versus moving through things in spite of how I'm speaking to myself and how I'm looking at myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is something that I'm currently really spotlighting and having to work through, because it's not my truth. It's not in accordance with my values. And so I'm having to really unpack that. Like that's definitely where I'm at right now. What do
Yeah.
you feel
I
like?
I think same. I had this like spiritual message come through back in December that was like, because I felt like I was just being like so hard on myself. I was simultaneously being so hard on myself, but also I'm like, but you're not good enough. Like if you be harder on yourself because you're still just like not good enough, you know? And then
Mm-hmm.
had this message come through that was like, okay, the wound the wound of like, you're not good enough, you're not doing it right, whatever that is. Um, that's not where you need to keep hitting yourself. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to hit harder. That wound is still there. That's where you need to be soft. Like, what you actually need to do is say, like, okay, this is when you take a step back and like love yourself for all the things that you're doing wrong or that you're not good enough at yet, whatever. Like for me, it was like I can't be happy in my environment. I can't feel pleasure in my environment because my house isn't clean enough. I'm not organized enough. I'm not doing, I don't have all these things that other people seem to be able to do. I just don't have that, and I'm just not good enough. And I am struggling there. And so I just beat myself up over and over and over and over again about it. But what was happening because of that was like, I don't enjoy my space. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
enjoying being on my couch with my, soft blankets. I'm not enjoying being in my bathtub with the warm water. I'm not enjoying my kitchen with all of the food that I've bought or my table with the flowers on it because I'm focused on, the crumbs, or I'm focused on the dishes or the yogurt smeared on my couch cushions, from my children. Like, all of those things are taking me away from experiencing pleasure, and their cause my go-to is to experience shame. And so I had to really
Mm-hmm.
like sit with that and say, like, you feel so much shame around your environment that it is me, are preventing yourself from being happy. And the only thing that's going to make you do better or make you feel better about this is you. And so I've had to work really, really hard to unpack that relationship to shame and to say, okay, I'm going to accept pleasure even in the midst of all of this mess. Let go of control and allow love to come in. And it is very much a practice. Like, that's something that I have to work on daily. But that's the only way that you get to where you're going, is by just showing up and practicing in it. And so I would say that, like, that level of shame has kept me from enjoying my or experiencing pleasure in my daily life. I think, like, in terms of sexual pleasure, um, it took a long time. We talked about body image in our last episode, but it's taken a long time for me, to get confident and comfortable in my body and to relax in it. Like, I have to not not force pleasure, but become an
Mm-hmm.
open conduit for pleasure and to allow pleasure to flow through me, because when I'm forcing it, I'm not fully experiencing it. And
Mm-hmm.
um yeah.
I'm just thinking about like how shame and control, there's so much familiarity there. There's so
Mhm.
much that we've built on that version of our identity that exists, that's rooted into that shame and that control and that fear. And in micromanaging our perception of ourselves and in that feeling, that deeply subconsciously held belief that we're not good enough, we, yeah, perceive ourselves in such a way that doesn't doesn't do us any favors. Like, I'm just thinking about like body image, how you were saying, even down to like my body, if I'm allowing it to feel pleasure, does that mean that my pubic area has to be perfectly trimmed? Does that mean that
Mhm.
I have to be hairless? Does that mean that I need to arch my back this certain way? Do I
Sure.
need to look like this while it's happening? Like, that is also so rooted in that perception of ourselves, in that shame and that familiar sphere, that when that enters our pleasure space, it just
Yeah.
dissipates. Like we can't fully be in those moments the way that we want because essentially we're not only performing for ourselves. I think that that's one part that I I feel like when I think of performance, I've thought about it in such a way that it's like it's always for the other person, but we definitely perform for ourselves as well.
Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it's yeah, it's liberating to be like, "Oh, actually, why do you think that that's the way it needs to be?" Like
Yeah,
it, you know,
I do.
it's just
Yeah. It's messed up, but I think like even down to thinking about like we're told that we can't or shouldn't experience pleasure during our bleeding phase, you know?
mhm.
Like that are expectations put upon us that like you're during your period like you shouldn't have sex and you can't, you shouldn't masturbate or I don't know who's saying these things, but I think that's just the general like maybe
Well, it's the
consensus.
shame.
There's just
Yeah.
shame around, around
The bleed
menstruation
in
and
general,
bleeding,
yeah.
yeah, blood. But like the first time I was ever with another woman who was on her period, I was like, there's nothing about this that's dirty or weird or wrong or like I'm actually like love this, like this experience is bringing me closer to um, the power of the womb. And like for myself, like period sex now is like one of my favorite ways to connect to my womb and connect to like the lessons that are supposed to come to me because like I feel like I'm in a place of so much like it's such a blank space, a blank slate, and a place of like
Mhm.
newness and openness for like what do I need to let out? What can I let in? And so like the reality is that like we pleasure is limitless and our desert we are so innately deserving not because of
Mhm.
anything we've done but because of the fact that we are like just alive. Like to be alive means you get to experience pleasure. Nobody would look at a bird and be like, oh, that bird should stop flapping around in that water fountain, like that's fucked up
Exactly.
with that bird, like no, let the bird be happy, let us be happy. Like just because we have a little bit bigger brains and we put ourselves in these little capitalist hamster wheels and we want to sit
That
in
part.
traffic for 2 hours, yeah, right?
Mhm.
Like just because we've decided to prioritize our production doesn't mean that we don't get to like fully immerse ourselves in the greatest parts of being alive. And there's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing wrong with talking about it either.
Exactly. Life is meant to be enjoyed. You're like, we have so much in our daily experience that we either, it's all about perception. Like, you can choose to see it as a gift and as something that you get to embrace, or you can, yeah, judge yourself for it. And it's like, why do the latter when you have grace and love and acceptance as an option? Like if you look on, the buffet table of options of
Mm-hmm.
energies that you get to choose to be in, like I'm gonna be the pleasure maximalist. I'm gonna choose to enjoy my life. I'm gonna choose to enjoy every single thing that I can because it's my experience and that's my
Yeah.
choice. That's my
At the end of
business.
the day, yeah, you are the one
Exactly.
that gets to die in your body and you die
That
alone.
part.
And that sounds dark and scary, but you do. And at the end of the day, at the end of life, you get to be the one to live with your experiences and to go to sleep with your experiences. And so daily, make a practice of asking yourself, like, if I die tonight, did I experience joy today? Do you want to die
Hmm.
without experiencing joy? Like it sounds dark, but that's the reality. Like when we because I am a death doula too, and so like loss and death is very much ingrained in all parts of the work that I do. And so this pleasure work is I do ask the question of like when you die, how did you experience pleasure, and so like sometimes we need to ask that question for us to realize like oh shit, like that is coming for me one day. And so I don't want to waste this opportunity, you know? So I hope everybody listening here today, after this episode is done, I hope you lay down and I hope you masturbate and I hope it feels really, really good because I don't want you to not have that experience.
Exactly. And make a list of the things that you did find pleasurable. If it's only
Mm-hmm.
one thing on your list tonight, hopefully the next night you can come up with another one. And from there, the more you look for it before you go to bed the next day, you're subconsciously going to look and maybe even create more opportunities for
Mm-hmm.
pleasure in your life.
Yeah,
So
pleasure creates pleasure too. Like it
that
very much builds upon itself. Like you're not gonna be able to stop once you become uninhibited and you allow yourself to really indulge in all of the chocolate syrupy goodness that life has. You know, it's a gift to be able to be alive and to have a body. And it doesn't always feel like one. And I know for many people, it is not always that way, and that our bodies also carry a lot of pain. Um, but ultimately, in whatever way you are able to embody pleasure, even if it is just gently, you know, rubbing your back or rubbing your feet or taking a bath or
mhm,
taking a walk and moving your body, you know, that can all be an orgasmic experience, and you deserve to have that experience.
you definitely do.
Yeah. Well, you are all abundantly loved, and we appreciate our listeners here at the Chrysalis Collective. We have a few things coming up. We have our Empowered Period workshop. This is a workshop for youth ages 12 to 17 with a womb. So, this is a queer and gender affirming period workshop. This is something that is open to all who do experience menstruation, even if you haven't gotten your period yet or you have had your period for a couple of years. This is still a place for you to come, and it's going to be a revolutionary space of learning about our cycles, talking about intuition and connecting with our wombs in that space. So that is March 17th at the Heart of Houston Birth Center. So there's information on our Instagram page, which is Alexis.
At the underscore chrysalis underscore collective is where you can connect with us and, slide in our DMs if you want. If you want to chat
Mm-hmm.
about anything womb related, if you are interested in attending a full moon circle, we
Mm-hmm.
have those every full moon. Um, we've been doing them at Everglades Park, which is a beautiful park that we get to gaze up at the full moon together at the end of the night, at the end of our time together, and we've created such a beautiful space within the community to really just be together and feel the energy of the full moon, connect to our womb. So that's something that you can keep an eye out for monthly.
Yes, and you can also follow us individually on Instagram. I am Metamorphosis Life Doula.
And I am Sol Iluna postpartum,
Okay. Well, this was great. Thanks, Alexis. I appreciate everything about you.
as do I. I'm so happy we're in Aquarius season.
Yay! All
I
right.
know.
Until next time, we are the Chrysalis Collective.
Bye.